Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. The late afternoon sun dipped low, staining the horizon in hues of amber and blood red, as Daniel Morgan stood in the cracked driveway of his father's old farmhouse. The place smelled of dust and rain-soaked wood, but what caught his eyes most was the shape sitting at the far end of the yard, a rusty, forgotten car, its body eaten by years of neglect. Beside him, his older sister Rebecca folded her arms, her lips curved into a mocking smile. "That's what he left you," she scoffed, her voice dripping with scorn. "Figures. It probably won't even start." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Daniel clenched his jaw, staring at the car. To Rebecca, it was junk, proof that their late father had always favored her with better things. To Daniel, though, it was strange. Why would his father, meticulous in his choices even to the end, leave only this to him? Rebecca brushed past him, heels clicking sharply against the gravel. "Meanwhile," she said, tilting her head toward the house where relatives still murmured after the funeral, "I got the lake cabin. Now, that is worth something." She said it loud enough for Daniel to hear, savoring the sting. Daniel didn't answer. He crouched near the car, dragging his fingers across the flaking paint. The touch felt oddly intimate, as though the car itself held a secret waiting to be unearthed. He remembered his father's last words, spoken weakly from the hospital bed. "Danny, take care of the old Chevy. It'll guide you." At the time, Daniel thought it was fever talk. Now, staring at the car, he wondered if there was more. Rebecca's laughter carried from a porch. "Don't waste your time. That thing belongs in a junkyard, just like your dreams." Daniel's chest tightened. She had always been like this, dismissing him, belittling him, standing taller in their father's eyes. Or, at least, that's what she wanted everyone to believe. As twilight deepened, the other guests departed, leaving only the siblings. The farmhouse grew still. Daniel pulled to the car door. It groaned open, and a stale odor wafted out. Inside, the seats were torn, springs exposed. On the dashboard, a faded photo of their father as a young man sat tucked under cracked glass. Daniel's throat tightened as he touched it. Rebecca leaned against the porch railing, watching with a smirk. "Go on, try to start it. Let's see the miracle Dad promised his golden boy." Daniel ignored her. His eyes had drifted to the trunk. Something about it seemed untouched, even sacred. The lock bore faint scratches, as if someone had tried to force it before. He swallowed hard. His heart pounded. With trembling hands, he slid the key their father had pressed in his palm at the funeral, small, unassuming, but heavy with intent, into the trunk's lock. The mechanism clicked. The trunk creaked open an inch, shadows hiding what lay inside. Daniel froze, every breath catching in his chest. Rebecca straightened suddenly, her smirk vanishing. Inside, just beyond the thin slit of darkness, something metallic glimmered faintly. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He hesitated, hand hovering. Whatever was in there wasn't just a forgotten relic. It was something his father had hidden deliberately. Something not meant for Rebecca's eyes. Rebecca took a step closer, her voice low now, uncertain. "What is it?" Daniel didn't answer. He gripped the edge of the trunk, inhaled sharply, and lifted it open. And in that moment, before his eyes could fully adjust, he felt it, the undeniable sense that nothing in his family would ever be the same again. The trunk lifted slowly, its rusted hinges shrieking like a warning. Dust billowed into the cool night air, catching the glow of the porch light as Daniel finally peered inside. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Inside wasn't a heap of tools or spare tires he had expected. Instead, carefully stacked and wrapped in brittle cloth were old ledgers, sealed envelopes, and a small wooden box that looked far too ornate to belong in such a forgotten car. Rebecca stepped down from the porch, her curiosity overcoming her smugness. "What the hell is all that?" she asked, trying to mask the crack in her voice. Daniel reached in and picked up the wooden box. Its surface was carved with initials, HM, Their father's name, Harold Morgan. The box rattled faintly in his hands, as if something metallic rested inside. He glanced at Rebecca. Her eyes gleamed with something sharp, greed, maybe fear. She had always believed she was the true heir, the one destined to inherit everything. The cabin, the accounts, their father's legacy. But this box, this was something he had chosen to give only to Daniel. Rebecca forced a laugh, too loud, too brittle. Probably just junk. Dad hoarded things, you know that. But Daniel noticed how she leaned forward, her fingers twitching, her gaze fixed on the box. He set it aside for now and pulled out one of the envelopes. The paper was yellowed, its edges frayed, but the handwriting was unmistakable, his father's bold scrawl. The envelope was addressed, simply, to the one who never stopped listening. Daniel's chest tightened. That had always been his father's quiet phrase for him. While Rebecca craved the spotlight, Daniel had been the one who lingered, who heard the silence behind his father's sighs. He slipped the letter into his jacket before Rebecca could snatch it. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you hiding?" "Nothing," Daniel muttered, though his hands trembled. Rebecca stepped closer, her tone sharpening. "Don't play games, Danny. If Dad left something valuable in there, it belongs to both of us. You think he'd trust you with anything big?" She let out a cruel laugh. "He knew you'd waste it, just like you wasted your life." Daniel flinched, but he held her stare. Somewhere deep inside, anger stirred, a slow burn he had never allowed himself to feel. His attention snapped back to the trunk. Beneath the ledgers and envelopes lay a metal tin, dented but locked with a heavy clasp. He brushed the dust away, revealing another set of initials etched faintly into the surface. Not his father's, but someone else's. J.M. His breath caught. J.M. could only mean one person. James Morgan. His uncle. The man no one in the family spoke about. The man who had vanished 30 years ago under mysterious circumstances. Rebecca's smirk faltered. She recognized it too. The silence between them thickened, charged with unease. Daniel's heart pounded. Why would his father leave something tied to James hidden away in this car? What connection was there that he had kept from both of them? Rebecca finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft now, almost a whisper. "Danny, close it. We shouldn't mess with this." But Daniel shook his head. He could still hear his father's final words. "It'll guide you." He pulled the tin free, ignoring the tremor in his hands. Rebecca stepped back, her face pale in the porch light. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, her voice shaking despite her attempt to control. Daniel straightened, clutching the tin to his chest. "No," he whispered, almost to himself. "I don't, but I'm going to find out." Rebecca's eyes darkened. For the first time that night, she didn't look amused or superior. She looked afraid, and Daniel realized something chilling. Whatever his father had hidden here, Rebecca already knew more about it than she was letting on. The night had grown heavier, silence pressing in on the old farmhouse as Daniel carried the tin and the wooden box inside. The house smelled of fading flowers from the funeral, mixed with the faint bitterness of stale coffee. The air was dense with memories. Rebecca followed, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floorboards. She kept a few steps behind, as though afraid of being caught too close to the secrets Daniel now held. Her usual smirk was gone, replaced by a stiffness around her mouth. Daniel set the tin and box on the dining table. Above them hung the same chandelier their father had insisted on polishing every month, though most bulbs had long since burned out. The dim light cast long, fractured shadows across the table, making the objects look more ominous than ever. Daniel's fingers hovered over the tin. Its lock was old, the metal nearly brittle with age. He pressed, twisted, it didn't budge. "Leave it," Rebecca said suddenly. Her voice was sharper than intended, startling even herself. Daniel glanced at her. "Why? You don't even know what's in it." Rebecca crossed her arms, hugging herself as though against a sudden chill. "Exactly. And maybe it should stay that way. Dad clearly wanted this buried. Don't you think there was a reason?" Daniel frowned. He could still see their father in the hospital bed, his trembling hand pressing the car key into Daniel's palm. "It'll guide you." The words echoed like a riddle. No, Daniel said quietly. He wanted me to find it. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Her silence said more than her words. Daniel turned to the ledgers, flipping one open. The handwriting inside was his father's, neat, deliberate. But what he found wasn't the record of farm expenses he expected. Page after page listed amounts of money, withdrawals and deposits, names he didn't recognize. At the top of one page was scrawled, "For James." His stomach lurched. James Morgan, the uncle who had disappeared when Daniel was still a child. Their father had never spoken his name without shutting down the conversation. Family lore said James had left after a bitter feud, but nobody knew why. And yet here was proof that their father had been moving money for him, even decades after his disappearance. Daniel looked up at Rebecca, but she was already staring at the ledger, her expression carefully neutral. Too careful. "You knew," Daniel whispered. Rebecca's eyes flickered. "Don't be ridiculous." But her tone betrayed her. It wasn't defensive, it was weary, as if she had been waiting for this moment and dreading it. Daniel leaned back in his chair, blood roaring in his ears. He remembered moments from childhood. Rebecca stopping him from asking questions about James, Rebecca whispering with their father when they thought he wasn't listening, Rebecca always seeming to know more about the family than he did. The truth pressed in on him like a tightening vice. Rebecca wasn't surprised by these records. She had known something all along. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice low, almost pleading. "Danny, listen. Not everything in this family is what it looks like. Dad, he wasn't the saint you thought he was. He had secrets. Dangerous ones." Daniel snapped the ledger shut. "Then why hide them from me?" Rebecca's mouth trembled before she forced it still. She said nothing. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Daniel's gaze drifted to the locked tin again, its cold metal glinting under the weak light. Whatever lay inside was the missing piece, the truth his father had guarded for decades. And as Rebecca shifted uneasily in the corner, Daniel realized something that chilled him to his core. Rebecca wasn't just afraid of what they might find. She was afraid of what he might finally know. The clock in the dining room ticked too loudly, each second cracking the silence between the siblings. Daniel sat at the table, staring at the dented tin, while Rebecca hovered by the window, her silhouette framed by the pale moonlight. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest, her nails digging into her sleeves as though she were holding herself together. She kept glancing toward the tin like it was alive, like opening it would summon something neither of them could control. "Don't," she whispered, her voice brittle. "Danny, I'm serious. You open that, and you'll wish you hadn't." Daniel met her eyes. "I already do." He rose from the chair, grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, and wedged it under the clasp. The tin groaned against his strength, resisting, then snapped open with a sharp crack that echoed through the house. Dust lifted in a slow cloud. Inside were bundles of aged papers, their edges curled, their ink faded. On top lay a stack of photographs, black and white, their corners yellowed. Daniel reached for the first. His breath caught. It was a picture of their father, much younger, maybe in his 20s, standing beside a man Daniel recognized only from old family albums. James Morgan. His uncle. Both men were smiling, but behind them was something chilling, an open field, and in the distance, the faint outline of a police cruiser. Daniel shuffled through more photos, each more unsettling than the last. His father and James near abandoned barns, near construction sites, always in places that seemed desolate, secretive. Rebecca spoke suddenly, her voice shaking. "Stop!" But Daniel didn't. His hands trembled as he pulled out a folded document at the bottom of the stack. He opened it, and the words slammed into him. Last will and testament of Harold Morgan, dated 5 years earlier than the one read at the funeral. This version of the will was not the same. It left the lake cabin, the prize inheritance everyone envied, not to Rebecca, but to Daniel. His name was written clearly, unmistakably. Daniel froze. Rebecca's face drained of color. That doesn't mean anything," she stammered, stepping closer. "It's old, outdated." The real one was read today, but her voice lacked conviction. Daniel stared at the document, his pulse hammering in his ears. The ink bore his father's signature, his lawyer's stamp. This wasn't some draft. This was binding, until someone had replaced it. Daniel looked up slowly. You knew. Rebecca's mouth trembled, but she forced a hard smile. You don't understand. Dad changed his mind. No, Daniel's voice was low, steady, sharper than she had ever heard it. You changed it. Rebecca's facade cracked. Her eyes glistened with a mix of fury and fear. Do you think you were ever the favorite? Do you think he trusted you with anything? He gave you that car because it was worthless. He never believed in you, Danny. Never. Daniel shook his head, holding up the old will. Then why hide this? Rebecca took a shaky step toward him, her hand twitching like she wanted to snatch the paper away. Because you weren't supposed to see it. For the first time in his life, Daniel saw his sister not as the confident, untouchable heir, but as someone cornered, desperate, and terrified of being exposed. The truth pressed down on him like a weight. His father had wanted him to have more. Rebecca had stolen it. And this wasn't just about money. The photos, the ledgers, the secrecy, they all tied back to James's disappearance, to something darker than inheritance squabbles. Daniel folded the will carefully, his hand steady now. I'm going to find out everything. Every lie you've told. Every secret you've buried. Rebecca's eyes narrowed, her voice breaking into a hiss. Then you'd better be ready for what comes with it. The farmhouse was silent except for the creak of old beams and the faint hiss of wind pressing against the windows. Daniel sat at the dining table, the open ledger before him, its columns of numbers lit by the soft glow of a single lamp. His father's handwriting lined every page, precise, deliberate, but concealing something that didn't yet make sense. Rebecca lingered by the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The tension between them hung heavy, thicker than the dust in the air. Danny, she said finally, her voice softer than before, almost gentle. You're tired. You've had a long day. Dad's funeral. All of this, it's messing with your head. Don't you think you're reading too much into a pile of old papers? Daniel didn't look up. He traced a finger over a repeated entry in the ledger. Payments marked only with the initials JM. The amounts were large, steady, stretching back decades. I'm not imagining this, he said quietly. Rebecca moved closer, her heels clicking softly. She reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was light, but Daniel felt the weight of it, the way she tried to tether him to her narrative. You've always been the dreamer, she whispered. The one chasing shadows while I dealt with reality. Dad trusted me with the important things because I could handle them. She paused, forcing a sad smile. You were never built for this kind of responsibility. Daniel stiffened. Her words sank like stones, dredging up memories of every time she had dismissed him, every time she had spoken over him at the dinner table, every time their father's silence had let her voice dominate. But now, with the ledger before him, Daniel felt something shift inside. He pushed her hand off gently and turned another page. This time, he found a note scribbled in the margin. Payment confirmed. Silence ensured. Rebecca's face blanched when she saw it. What silence? Daniel asked, his voice sharper now. What was he paying for? Rebecca recovered quickly, though her smile wavered. Danny, it could mean anything. Farm debts, loans. You're twisting this because you want to believe Dad cared more for you than he did. But he didn't. He never did. Daniel met her gaze. Then why hide the will? Her mask cracked for an instant. Fear flickered in her eyes, then hardened into cold steel. Because you weren't ready. And you still aren't. She leaned in close, her whisper a venomous hiss. Do you really want to know the truth about Uncle James? About Dad? Some things are better buried. Daniel's pulse thundered. He could feel it. The truth wasn't just about inheritance. It was about betrayal buried so deep that his father had gone to his grave with it. Rebecca straightened, her voice calm again, almost soothing. Look at yourself. Digging through dusty books, chasing conspiracies. You'll tear this family apart if you keep going. Daniel stood slowly, the ledger clutched in his hand. His jaw was tight, his chest burning with something he hadn't felt in years, defiance. The family was already torn apart, he said. I'm just finding out why. Rebecca's smile faltered. For the first time, she didn't look in control. As Daniel walked past her toward the stairs, ledger in hand, Rebecca called after him. Her voice was low, cold, stripped of all pretense. Careful, Danny. You keep digging, and you might end up just like James. Daniel froze. The weight of her words pressed against him like ice. He turned, but Rebecca had already slipped into the shadows of the hallway, leaving him with the echo of her warning. And in that moment, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Rebecca wasn't just hiding the truth. She was protecting it. The house felt different after Rebecca's warning, as if her words had seeped into the walls themselves. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay awake in his old childhood room, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying her hiss. You might end up just like James. By dawn, he was back at the kitchen table with a ledger, its brittle pages spread before him. The initials JM appeared again and again, but always with the same rhythm. Monthly payments, consistent sums. Until one year, suddenly, the payment stopped. The last entry was dated October 12, 1998. Next to it, in his father's familiar hand, were two words that made Daniel's blood run cold. Final settlement. Daniel slammed the ledger shut, his pulse hammering. Something was off. He turned the book over, examining the spine. A faint bulge caught his eye, as though the binding concealed more than paper. His hands trembled as he worked at it, finally prying loose a strip of tape. A folded sheet of yellowed paper slipped out. Daniel opened it carefully. The letter was short, hurriedly scrawled. If he keeps pressing, I won't have a choice. You must understand, this can't come out. It ends tonight. There was no signature. But at the bottom, smudged by what looked like an old coffee stain, were the same initials. RM. Rebecca Morgan. Daniel's chest tightened. His sister's name, linked directly to the final night Uncle James was ever seen. He read it again, his eyes burning, his hands shaking. It wasn't just a note. It was a confession. A window into the night, their uncle had disappeared without explanation, swallowed by silence. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Daniel stuffed the paper into his pocket just as Rebecca entered the kitchen, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She looked calm, too calm, her smile practiced. Still digging, she asked lightly, setting a mug in front of him. I thought I heard you pacing all night. You really need rest, Danny. You're unraveling. Daniel forced himself to meet her eyes. He could feel the hidden letter like a burning coal in his pocket. Rebecca, he said slowly, carefully, what happened to Uncle James? Her smile flickered, but only for an instant. Then she laughed, shaking her head. Still with that? He left. Everyone knows it. You were too young to remember how restless he was. Always talking about getting out, starting over somewhere far away. Daniel leaned forward. Then why did Dad keep paying him? Rebecca froze. The silence stretched, sharp as broken glass. She recovered quickly, sipping her coffee, but her hand trembled ever so slightly. Old debts, she said casually. James borrowed money. Dad bailed him out. That's all. Daniel studied her. Every word from her lips sounded rehearsed now. Every smile a mask stretched too thin. He wanted to slam the letter down in front of her to watch the mask shatter. But instinct told him no, not yet. Instead, he stood, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. I don't believe you, he said. Rebecca's eyes darkened. Careful, Danny. Daniel turned and walked out before she could see how hard his hands were shaking. Out on the porch, the cold morning air hit him like a slap. He pulled the letter from his pocket again, reading the jagged words until they blurred. His father's payments. Rebecca's initials. The final settlement. Uncle James hadn't left. He'd been silenced. And Rebecca knew exactly how. The morning was heavy with mist when Daniel walked out to the barn. The old Ford sat there like a corpse, its rusted frame sagging under decades of neglect. His sister's mocking words echoed in his mind. It won't even start. But Daniel wasn't here to start it. He was here to listen. He circled the car slowly, his fingers grazing the corroded paint. The smell of mildew clung to the air, mixed with the faint metallic bite of oil long dried. The windshield was clouded, cracked across the middle, as though something or someone had once struck it hard. His father's voice returned to memory. Some things are best left alone. Daniel's stomach knotted, but he opened the driver's door anyway. It groaned like a wounded animal. Dust swirled up, stinging his nose. He slid inside, running his hand across the torn upholstery. Every surface seemed to whisper secrets. He reached for the glove box. Stuck. He yanked it harder until the rusted latch snapped. Inside was nothing but brittle papers, old registration slips, oil change receipts. He tossed them aside, frustration mounting. Then his eyes fell on the floor mat. It was uneven, bulging slightly. Daniel pulled it back and froze. A small panel had been crudely cut into the floorboard. Someone had tried to hide it, but years of damp had loosened the seal. His pulse thundered as he pried the panel open. Beneath it lay a shallow compartment. Inside was a bundle wrapped in wax cloth, stained dark with time. His breath caught as he pulled it free and unwrapped it. A leather-bound journal. His father's. Daniel's hands trembled as he flipped it open. Pages upon pages of numbers, names, and coded notes filled the book. And there, in stark handwriting, one line underlined twice. James threatened exposure. R handled it. Must remain buried. Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked, reading it again, but the words didn't change. R handled it. Rebecca. A scraping sound jolted him. He whipped his head toward the barn door. Shadows shifted. Someone was outside. Danny. Rebecca's voice floated in, syrupy smooth. Why are you out here so early? Daniel's chest tightened. He quickly shoved the journal under his jacket, slammed the panel shut, and kicked the floor mat back into place. Rebecca's footsteps approached, echoing on the wooden planks. He forced a calm voice. Just looking at the car. Thought maybe I could get it running. She appeared in the doorway, her silhouette haloed by the gray morning light. Her eyes scanned him, too sharp, too knowing. You've never cared about this junk before, she said softly. Funny how Dad leaves it to you, and suddenly it matters so much. Daniel swallowed, every muscle tense. He could feel the journal pressed against his ribs like a heartbeat. Maybe I just want to know what he saw in it, he replied. Rebecca smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Be careful, little brother. Curiosity has a way of getting people lost. Her words lingered like poison as she turned and walked away. Only when her footsteps faded did Daniel dare to move. He pulled the journal out again, gripping it tightly. It was proof, tangible, undeniable proof, that his father and Rebecca had conspired in James's disappearance. But if Rebecca suspected he had it, Daniel realized with a chill, he wasn't just uncovering the past. He was stepping straight into the same trap that had swallowed his uncle. Daniel barely slept that night. The journal lay on his desk, its cracked leather cover staring back at him like a sealed coffin. He had tried to read it by candlelight, but the more he turned its brittle pages, the heavier his chest felt. The entries were not written like a diary, but like a ledger. Dates lined the margins, each tied to payments, initials, and terse notes. Some entries were circled, some violently crossed out. March 4th, 1998. James demanded his share. R. Growing reckless. June 11th, 2002. Silence bought. Truth must never surface. The words swam in his head. What truth? Why silence? At dawn, Daniel made a pot of black coffee and sat back down with the journal. He forced himself to focus. He noticed a pattern. Initials beside every payment. R. He knew Rebecca. J. For James. But there were others. L. And D. His pulse quickened as his finger traced down a page. Payment to L. Secured. D. Must never know. His breath caught. D. Must never know. His name. Hands trembling, Daniel turned the page. There, written in a hurried scrawl, was the entry that turned his stomach cold. Truth. Daniel is not mine. Rebecca insisted to be buried. James discovered it, threatened exposure. How to be handled. The words blurred as his eyes filled with tears. Not mine. Daniel's mind reeled, replaying every moment of his childhood. The times Rebecca looked at him with that smug superiority. The times his father avoided answering questions about the past. Suddenly, it all made sense. He wasn't just the overlooked son. He wasn't a son at all. The barn door creaked in his memory. The way Rebecca had watched him yesterday, her smile too sharp. She already knows. Daniel shoved back from the desk, knocking the chair over. He paced the room, the journal clutched in his hands. Rage and heartbreak crashed over him in waves. If James had threatened exposure, and his father had written handled it, Rebecca hadn't just stolen affection or inheritance. She had stolen his very place in the family. The sound of footsteps on the porch froze him. A sharp knock rattled the door. "Danny," Rebecca's voice again, sweet on the surface, iron underneath. "You didn't come down for breakfast." Daniel pressed the journal to his chest, every instinct screaming not to open the door. "Go away," he called, trying to steady his voice. Silence. Then a low chuckle. "You think you're the first one to find his little notes? You don't know what you're holding, Danny. That book will ruin you more than it ruins me." Her words slithered under the door, colder than the morning air. Daniel backed away, his knuckles white around the leather spine. For the first time, he understood Rebecca wasn't simply cruel. She was dangerous. And now he carried the one thing she couldn't let him keep. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, the journal heavy in his lap. The words inside gnawed at him, each line like a blade carving away at his identity. "Daniel is not mine." Rebecca insisted it be buried. "Not mine." The phrase circled his mind endlessly. He replayed birthdays, family dinners, and all those times he caught his father watching him with a distant, unreadable gaze. Was that guilt? Was that shame? Or pity for a boy living under a lie? The morning light crept across the floor, but he felt only darkness. For 25 years, he had called a man dad who had never been his. And Rebecca, his sister, wasn't just cruel, she was complicit. His hand shook as he closed the journal. A part of him wanted to march downstairs, slam it onto the kitchen table, and scream the truth into Rebecca's smug face. But another part, the trembling, cautious part, knew that would be suicide. If she had been ruthless enough to bury James, what would stop her from burying him? The creak of the floorboards outside his room startled him. A soft knock followed. "Danny." Rebecca's voice was gentle, almost maternal. "You've been quiet all morning. You all right in there?" Daniel's throat dried. He forced himself to reply, "I'm fine." Silence. Then, the faint scrape of her nails along the wooden doorframe. "You know, Dad never wanted you messing with that car. Some doors shouldn't be opened." Daniel's chest tightened. He waited, holding his breath, until her footsteps finally retreated. He stayed still for minutes after, ears straining, convinced she lingered nearby. That afternoon, he tried to distract himself by walking into town, the journal tucked under his coat. But paranoia followed him. Every glance from a stranger felt like surveillance. Every passing car seemed to slow as it approached. He couldn't shake the sense that Rebecca had eyes everywhere. In the diner, he opened the journal again, desperate for answers. A waitress refilled his coffee, and Daniel noticed her curious glance at the book. He snapped it shut instantly, his nerves raw. He stared at the window, reflections ghosting over the glass. He whispered to himself, "If I'm not his son, then who am I?" The question hollowed him. When he returned to the farmhouse that evening, Rebecca was waiting on the porch, rocking in their father's old chair. A faint smile curved her lips. "Out for a walk?" she asked casually. Her eyes, however, darted to his coat. Daniel's hand pressed instinctively against the journal hidden inside. "Yeah, just needed air." She rose slowly, her movements measured, predatory. "You're carrying something heavy these days, little brother. If you ever feel like sharing the burden, I'm here." The way she said it, sharing the burden, felt like a knife wrapped in silk. Daniel forced a nod and slipped past her into the house. His pulse hammered. He knew then that the clock was ticking. Rebecca was circling him like prey, waiting for him to slip. Alone in his room, Daniel locked the door, pulled the journal out, and whispered a vow. "She buried James. She buried the truth. But she won't bury me." The farmhouse creaked in the night, every sound amplified in Daniel's restless mind. He lay awake, the journal open on his chest. He had combed through the pages a dozen times, but one section in the back, written in a different hand, kept drawing his eyes. Unlike his father's meticulous notes, This handwriting was jagged, rushed, like a man writing under pressure. L. Won't stop calling. Wants acknowledgement. R. Insists we pay him off. Daniel can never know the truth. If he learns, everything unravels. Daniel sat up, his breath shallow. L. He flipped through the earlier entries, his finger tracing each line until the pattern emerged. Payments marked with L, stretching back decades, always described as hush money. One note clenched his stomach. 1989, initial payment to L for silence regarding the boy. 1989, the year he was born. Daniel's chest tightened as a name surfaced in his memory. Leonard Price, a man who had once worked their land, drinking himself into rages, a shadow at the edge of every family gathering until he vanished after a violent argument with his father. Leonard. L. Daniel gripped the pages so hard they nearly tore. Leonard Price wasn't just a name from whispered family gossip. He was his father. The room spun. His entire life had been a script written in lies. His true father cast out, his mother silent, his supposed sister pulling strings to keep him blind. But why? Why would Rebecca protect such a poisonous truth? A creak on the staircase snapped him from thought. He shoved the journal beneath his pillow just as his door handle rattled. Danny, Rebecca's voice drifted through the crack. We need to talk. Daniel froze, every muscle rigid. The handle jiggled again. Then a faint metallic click. She was trying a key. Heart hammering, he sprang to his feet, locking the window latch. He grabbed the journal and backed into the far corner. The door opened a fraction. Rebecca's face appeared in the dim glow, her smile uncanny in the half-light. You've been busy, she said softly, carrying around secrets that don't belong to you. Daniel's throat burned. I know who he is. Her smile faltered, then hardened. Then you know why this can't leave these walls. Her eyes darted to his pillow, the place he had stashed the journal moments ago. She stepped inside, her movements deliberate, predatory. Daniel clutched the book tighter. You lied to me my whole life. You buried James. And now you want to bury me too. For the first time, her mask cracked. Her jaw tightened, her voice a hiss. You were never meant to exist, Daniel. You were a mistake I cleaned up once. Don't make me clean it up again. The words chilled him to the bone. Before she could advance, Daniel shoved past her, sprinting down the stairs, the journal pressed to his chest like a lifeline. Rebecca's footsteps thundered behind him. The night swallowed him as he burst onto the porch, cold air stinging his lungs. He didn't know where he was running, only that he had to survive long enough to make the truth heard. Behind him, Rebecca's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. You can't outrun blood, Danny. It always catches up. The night swallowed Daniel as he stumbled through the tall grass. The journal clutched tight against his chest. Each breath burned his lungs, each step snagged on roots and stones. Behind him, the farmhouse loomed, its windows glowing faintly like the watchful eyes of a predator. And then, the sound. Rebecca's boots striking the porch boards. Slow, measured. She isn't chasing, she's stalking. Daniel veered into the woods, branches clawing at his arms. The moon broke through the clouds in fleeting bursts, lighting his path just enough to keep from tumbling into the ravine. His father's words, written in the journal, echoed in his head. Daniel can never know the truth. But now he did, and it had put a target squarely on his back. From behind him, Rebecca's voice floated through the trees. Calm, taunting. You've always been fragile, Danny. Do you really think you can outrun me? You couldn't outrun the truth, and you won't outrun this. Her tone sent ice down his spine. He ducked behind a thick oak, pressing his back against the bark, trying to quiet his ragged breathing. Silence. Then a twig snapped, too close. Daniel's hand tightened around the journal. He could almost feel his father's words pulsing inside it, the only shield he had left. He crept deeper into the woods, following the faint trickle of the creek. If he could reach town, he could find anyone to help him. But the shadows seemed to thicken, and with them, his doubt. Every rustle of leaves felt like her breath on his neck. Then he saw it, the beam of a flashlight slicing through the darkness. Rebecca's voice again, sharper now. Give me the book, and maybe I'll let you walk away. Keep it, and you'll end up like James. Daniel's stomach twisted. His uncle's disappearance was no longer a family rumor. It was a warning. He stumbled across a fallen log, scraping his palms, but forced himself to crawl forward. The creek shimmered ahead, reflecting the moonlight. Salvation felt close enough to taste. Then the beam fixed on him. Found you. Her words cracked like a whip. Daniel bolted, crashing through the underbrush, the journal thumping against his chest. Rebecca's footsteps pounded behind him, relentless, fueled by fury. He reached the creek, splashing across the icy water, his shoes slipping on mossy stones. He nearly fell, but clutched the journal above his head, desperate to keep it dry. On the opposite bank, he collapsed, gasping, turning just in time to see Rebecca at the water's edge. Her flashlight lit her face, feral, twisted with rage. You can't hide forever. That book belongs to me. Daniel forced himself up, every muscle screaming, and staggered toward the distant road. A faint set of headlights glowed on the horizon. For the first time all night, hope flickered. Rebecca shouted after him, her voice slicing through the night. If you take one more step, Danny, you won't live to regret it. But Daniel didn't stop. He tightened his grip on the journal and stumbled toward the lights, praying they belonged to someone who could finally end the nightmare. The headlights grew brighter as Daniel stumbled toward the gravel road. The journal pressed so tightly to his chest it felt like part of him. His legs wobbled, lungs clawing for air, but the sight of that approaching car was enough to pull him forward. Behind him, Rebecca's footsteps thundered closer. Daniel, she screamed, her voice tearing through the night. Stop! You don't understand what you're doing. Daniel spun around, face pale in the moonlight, his breath ragged. No, he shouted back, voice cracking but firm. For once in my life, I finally do. Rebecca's eyes blazed, feral, her hand reaching into her coat. For a moment, Daniel saw the glint of something metallic. His blood iced. The car slowed as it neared, its engine rumbling low. Daniel lurched into the middle of the road, arms waving. The driver braked hard, headlights glaring over his soaked figure. The door swung open. Sheriff Holt stepped out, his face etched with concern. Daniel? What the hell are you doing out here? Rebecca froze at the edge of the trees, the flashlight beam snapping off. Her smile returned, sharp as broken glass. Sheriff, she said sweetly, stepping into the light. Thank God you're here. My brother's lost his mind. He's been running through the woods, talking nonsense about Dad and Uncle James. Shut up. Daniel's voice cracked as he ripped the journal from under his coat, shoving it toward the sheriff. Read it. Everything's in here. My father. He wasn't my father. James, Rebecca. What she did to him. It's all in here. The sheriff's weathered eyes narrowed. He took the journal, flipping through the brittle pages. His lips moved silently as he scanned the entries, his expression hardening with every line. Rebecca's mask began to slip. That's just old rambling, she snapped. Dad was confused. He wrote things down when his mind was failing. You can't trust any of it. But the sheriff's gaze cut straight through her. Funny, he said coldly, because I remember when James Price went missing. Whole county searched, came up empty. And here it says, he tapped the page with his thick finger. R handled it. Rebecca's face drained of color. Daniel stepped closer, trembling but defiant. She's been hiding it her whole life. Hiding me. Hiding the truth about who I am. And she thought she could bury me too. For the first time, Rebecca's composure shattered. Her hand twitched toward her coat pocket again, but the sheriff was faster. His revolver gleamed in the headlights as he barked. Don't even think about it, Rebecca. Silence fell. Only the whisper of the wind and Daniel's shallow breathing filled the night. Rebecca's shoulders sagged. The smile she wore for years, the one that made her seem untouchable, flickered, then died. You don't know what it's like, she hissed, eyes darting between them. To hold a family together with lies. To carry a secret so heavy it would destroy everything if it got out. I did what had to be done. Daniel's voice trembled, but it carried steel. No, you did what served you. The sheriff stepped forward, cuffing her wrists with a click that echoed in the dark. Rebecca Price, You're under arrest for the disappearance of James Price, and we'll see what else comes to light." As she was led to the patrol car, Rebecca's eyes locked on Daniel one last time. No words, just a glare that promised she would never forgive him. Daniel stood frozen in the headlights, the journal still clutched in his hands. For the first time, he felt the weight of the lies lifting, leaving only exhaustion and a hollow ache where his identity used to be. But as the sheriff drove off, Rebecca's silhouette swallowed by the night, Daniel looked at the journal again. It wasn't just a ledger of betrayal. It was proof he had survived the truth that was meant to break him. The old Ford still sat rusting in the barn, holding the ghost of his father's secrets. But Daniel knew he'd never fear opening its doors again. The lies were buried now, along with Rebecca's reign of silence. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt free.